Okay, this is the third lecture of a special introductory course on Mardukite systemology. It's called The Power of Zu. Okay, resuming here, this is covering the SAC report 23 December 19. And the title of this lecture is Zu is the life force present in the physical universe. So, a concise summation of the precise spiritual philosophy that's present behind Mardukite systemology as a paradigm and Zuism as a tradition. This is actually expertly stated as a summary in this booklet here. It's Mardukite Zuism, a brief introduction. And this booklet is actually based on the introductory chapter lesson summaries from the volume Tablets of Destiny, which is based on the Tablets of Destiny lecture series that was given in August of 2019 privately before that book was actually released. So I'll just read to you here a very easy summary, vocabulary and such. Spiritual universe of metaphysical or spiritual matter and metaphysical or spiritual energy, we call that on. And there's a physical universe of physical matter and physical energies for what we call ki. So we have the spiritual universe on, physical universe ki. These are existentially independent of each other, maintaining a single channel, conduit, or connection, which is alpha spirit awareness as spiritual life energy, or what we're calling Zu now. So Zu. The alpha spirit engages a Zu line, a spiritual lifeline of Zu energy, to a genetic vehicle or organic body to experience the physical universe, which we call beta existence. So you have an alpha existence that's spiritual in nature, beta existence that's physical in nature. This is pretty easy stuff to pick up. So in systemology, we often tend to refer to the physical body as the genetic vehicle of an alpha spirit. So we say that certain physical organic life systems of this genetic vehicle are actually controlled by the alpha spirit. And how is that done? Well, using a continuous lifeline of Zu energy. So, and this is also explained in the brief introduction to Mardukite Zuism booklet. It explains, let me read here, a spiritual continuum or conduit channel of Zu, which is absolute spiritual life energy, directly links our awareness levels of I am, true self or alpha spirit, with the degrees of motion and variation in the physical universe. The alpha spirit or soul identity is the I or self connected to the operation and control of the organic physical body or genetic vehicle. So that's just kind of a summation of what I just explained, but in concise terms. We're being very precise now with our systemology and our definitions, our classifications, codifications. So the systemology of physics. Oh, and we got a critic here. So the systemology of physics is introduced within the grade 3 materials, such as the Tablets of Destiny book. And that mainly pertains to the interaction or communication of energy between two primary principles of manifestation. That's substance and motion. So in the realm of physics, we're dealing with substance and motion. Okay, but these are observed principles only. They don't directly account for the third and necessary principle of manifestation, which is consciousness or awareness. So it is only when we consider all three principal aspects of manifestation, substance, motion, and awareness, that we are able to effectively use our standard model as an appropriate estimation of reality. Otherwise, we just have a really nice picture to look at. And it's only when we realize that there is a zoo force present in each one of these aspects that we see any singularity or unification taking place in this reasoning. And this is the unification back of all existence that really scientists, philosophers, mystics, each in their own way has gone in pursuit of. And of course, many people will say, well, they've all gone looking, and haven't necessarily discovered this truth that could be expressed to all. What makes you think you're doing well? So we're doing a lot of things different now. We're doing things completely different than anything that's ever been done before. We're understanding things different than they've ever been understood before. Applying a whole new set of semantics to a paradigm which has never been so clearly held in a single human consciousness for probably 6,000 years. So now when we look at these things, we got substance, we got motion, we got awareness, or consciousness. So as a substance, we find Zu in the cosmic code, the intelligent design that programs all things to be things, all things to have its forms. So we find that cosmic code of Zu in the representation or principle of substance. In motion, Zu is the energetic activity, the exchange of information and interactive communications that vibrate within and radiate from forms and carry them in space. So that's motion. And we find Zu in that as well. Then when we look at the third principle, as a consciousness or awareness, Zu is quite simply the vital force, the life force that we've been talking about through this whole lecture, and essentially the spiritual energy that allows a perspective of an observer to even exist. It is the awareness, the consciousness of the observer that applies the third principle of manifestation to substance and motion. And it is what differentiates the forms and calculates their motions, and this is what we call our experience of reality. So in this present series of lectures that I've been giving, we're primarily focused on this third aspect of Zu, which is the spiritual life energy that we recognize as the unique vital life force present in all organic living forms, or else life forms. So we're talking about Zu as the vital energy in life forms. And these organic life forms are treated as organic, genetic, carbon-based vehicles that are under the command of self. And so personal fragmentation ensues when the self or alpha spirit is not demonstrating its own self-determined control of the organic genetic vehicle, the one that it most closely identifies with. We usually attribute this to our physical identity. Of course, it has no reflection of what self actually is. In fact, some so intensely identify with the genetic organism that the self loses its own self-directed, actualized awareness to basically the automation and functions inherent in the life form to maintain its own level of beta awareness, most of which are reactionary, programmed, and coded. To be honest, it doesn't take a lot of awareness from self to keep a genetic vehicle operating because it has its own mind systems, which we called the reactionary or reactive control center. Now, we can establish that there is a design and a program behind substances and motions easily enough, but what most individuals, at least at this stage of development, are primarily interested in is the application and function of the Zu chain reaction, primarily by will. And the systemology of will is introduced in our textbook Crystal Clear. So it's not the I or alpha spirit directly, but it is the spiritual equivalent for the self. For example, as the effort that you would see in beta systems. So the will and the intention is the spiritual equivalent of the effort that you would find in the physical, the beta systems and motors and so forth that are connected along the zoo line or zoo continuum as they manifest in the physical universe. And as a result, and with the assistance of the standard model, we can better realize now how this singular universal energetic force actually exists along an entire spectrum of potential manifestation. It's very similar to the way we view the electromagnetic spectrum in the physical sciences. The difference, however, being between the standard model and the paradigms provided by traditional sciences is really that our holistic systemology also accounts for the other aspects that do not fit the maths of beta physics. Therefore, these physical sciences have not yet been able to completely unify an understanding of the singular force we're calling zoo. And of course, we do not consider our model or the field of systemology as exclusive to some immaterial, intellectual, fanciful metaphysics. It must necessarily include data for spiritual or metaphysical existence, but it has to also very much apply to the physical universe and to the world that we interact with all around us. It's only as a result of the physical sciences choosing to separate their understanding, each science existing in isolation as a tradition of beta knowledge, that makes anything else beyond such known paradigms seem very mystical and mysterious. Everything beyond what one has accepted or understood becomes infinity. And as one's realizations and understanding increases, so does that point that we see at that distant horizon of infinity. In most cases, we chart this beyond a glass ceiling, as we see with the physical sciences today, paradigms that cannot get out from under which these encasements that they've created for themselves. Looking beyond a paradigm is simply looking beyond a paradigm. When many have walked this pathway before, they've successfully demonstrated that it's not any more supernatural than if we were to compare work and innovations of a primitive civilization with the same human condition more recently on the timeline concerning something demonstrated or experienced, such as space travel, for example, the ability to relay this reality. Certainly, a vista of reasoning would seem supernatural to a less educated population. The concept of space travel, the concept of remote control, the concept of harnessing electromagnetics and electricity, those that would maintain no tangible reality communicated on this, those that were not yet as a population up to par with this level of knowledge, even the stuff we take for granted as technology today, these were just as real and imaginable possibilities thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago during the inception of current civilization. So what's changed? What's changed along our genetic timeline, the human condition as a species, really is the capacity and the content for a higher knowledge and personal self-actualization regarding a universe that has otherwise not changed a bit in terms of its own objective potential. Only the life form, the beings, the alpha spirits manifesting, only the life form is demonstrating some application of awareness in changing their willingness for things to be. And there being the third element of the equation: substance, motion, and awareness. Now, if we were to chart the highest frequency potentials of personal zoo, they would be roughly equivalent to positions on our standard model or Zoo line, marked as control centers. These control centers, they're explained in detail within the primary grade 3 textbooks, Tablets of Destiny, Crystal Clear. But with these control centers, there's optimum peaks that can be communicated at each level along the entire spectrum. And this is essentially what happens naturally as a seeker is taking steps toward greater degrees of self-defragmentation. It just happens in such a way now that as part of the progressive developments that are taken in this new field of next-gen systemology, that a full doctorate level nuts and bolts understanding of the methodology is not actually necessary in order to obtain effective results from its procedures. So, however, we cannot always expect that the conditions that it's applied to in everyday life will be specifically covered as such in one of my lectures or a specific book. It's about the pattern and the overall wide-angle view that we're looking to open awareness up to, because it is of great benefit for an operator or a technician of this tech to learn as much as possible about the ins and outs of the work, which is, for example, one of the primary purposes behind me going back to do this lecture series. Because the intention of the lectures in this series is really to provide a general introduction to the subject and the nature of Zoo, as opposed to going into some of the further advancements that have been provided in our textbooks. So it's important because this term is used a lot as a catch-all, either in the form of Zoo or as stated as awareness. It's probably one of the most abundant concepts in our work. So it's important not only to us to define what it is, but also to define what it is not. Because as soon as we have begun to present this next-gen methodology of applied spiritual technology, we immediately have a series of our seekers and our readers that are going to directly confuse the nature and function of Zoo with something or another that they've picked up from the explanations and demonstrations provided in other traditions and paradigms. So we've been very careful in our methodology and our standard model to not confuse the actual nature of Zoo or the Zoo line with any direct expressions or interactions with, for example, the alpha spirit, the will, the mind system, the biochemical organism, to make sure that we have a new understanding that is applicable to our work, to our effective systemology, not simply the understanding that's been given to us. So when we're talking about Zoo, we're talking about a circulation of energy, communication of energy, communication of data, communication, circulation of awareness, a lot of motions, points in motion, gauging awareness, consciousness. Each level, each aspect of existence and manifestation has these elements as part of it, and yet not one of them individually is Zoo. Okay, that has to be expressed very firmly. And this communication of Zoo is present in each principle of manifestation, substance, motion, and awareness, but it's not any one of these either. We plot the positive spectrum of Zoo or the Zoo line on our standard model from 0 to infinity. That's the positive spectrum. It's the continuity of the physical universe represented at 0. Infinity we've represented with the sign of infinity, which is the horizontally placed Arabic 8, the number 8. And in between, we've charted 7 divisions based on the demonstrations we've been given in the ancient lore. So the arcane tablets, cuneiform tablets, the arcane scrolls is a series of information that exists behind even the esoteric underground that's fueled it, and few have actually had access to it directly. Well, that's been changing. It's been changing actually over the last over 100 years, but we seem to be accelerating with our understanding and application of it now. So aside from the direction and composition of the alpha spirit itself, which we plot near one end of the observed spectrum of our continuum, our zoo line, we mark the alpha spirit, the I, the self, at 7, just below the point of 8, below, the infinity of nothingness. And so aside from the physical delivery of zoo in the physical world to maintain the genetic physical organism, which takes place near the other end of the spectrum, near the physical range, more like at 1, 0.1. There is, of course, another aspect that communicates this energy between what we can call the spirit and the body, and yes, that's called the mind system. And of course, this has become all too cliche. We all too often have people referring to body, mind, and spirit, in the New Age as if they know something about these words, as if they know something about it. It's also important not to identify zoo directly with the mind itself, which would be again incorrect. The zoo energy is communicated or transmitted directly via thoughts. And by thoughts, we don't just mean the mind system as a whole, and we certainly don't mean the brain. We could use the sciences and other terminologies to refer to the processes and functions of these other organs and systems, but only about how they promote, alter, or affect the nature of the zoo energy expressed in the transmission. I mean, for some, it might just be easier to consider this level of zoo as the stuff that thoughts are made of. So we've explained how there's essentially an essence of zoo found within everything, all substance, motion, and consciousness. However, we equate zoo most often with awareness. It just seems to be best understood and relayed that way because it's the part of it that we are most fully able to be self-directing. So when we speak of zoo as awareness, we aren't saying that that's all that it is, because it is found in all these other component aspects itself. Those are the aspects of the other components that we are touching upon when we activate with our own like energies of zoo as awareness. And so a lot of seekers have best understood this nature of zoo in relation to awareness. At least as it applies to the individual and their own spiritual life force. I mean, that's probably the most accurate representation of this force as applies to the spiritual life energy that's impinging upon or intervening with the range of existence that we consider the physical universe. I mean, we know that our model, it shows that there's an absolute source of zoo in existence. It's also the only absolute in existence, the only absolute that we can actually be certain of in existence, and that's what the Sumerians called the Abzu. And it's written ABZU on the old cuneiform tablets. Sometimes the inverse of that, but that's a subject about cuneiform writing styles. Okay, but it roughly translates to abyss by most mythographers and scholars of the academic community. I mean, that's, if you go back and read this stuff, that's what you're going to find it equated to. So when using esoteric semantics, we find the abyss is actually the affinity of nothingness. So we can apply that, the affinity of nothingness, on our model. And then if we investigate further the esoteric meaning behind the original cuneiform sign, we can discover another secret-ish definition that probably wasn't fully understood to the people would be father of or heart of Zu. So essentially, we are treating the infinity of nothingness, meaning infinite latent potentiality, so nothing in particular, it's infinity of nothingness, as an infinite source of Zu. Now, if we consider what this means in regards to our standard model, there's an infinite amount of Zu extant at 8, which is the point marked as the extent of conceivable existence, even the metaphysical existence, or spiritual universe. At the point where we find a peak extend from this infinity as an individuation, we mark the I, or I am, as the alpha spirit at 7. And so, although it's not an infinite source, the alpha spirit maintains a very significant capacity for you and to tap the highest, clearest degree of vibration concerning existence as a frequency. I mean, this is you. This is the I am at 7 is the individuated point or peak that's extended from infinity. I mean, you can't get any clearer than that. At 7 on the standard model, we are demonstrating the uppermost ideal spiritual state of beingness, the supreme state of being, just outside the gates of the infinite abyss. And that's basically what this is demonstrating. Of course, by definition, we can't be certain that there's any sense or self-awareness as an individuated spirit or identity as self, even as a spiritual self, once we step beyond 7 into the infinity of nothingness. I mean, there's an irony here. Because although we set our sights on infinity at 8, in terms of self-actualization as a realization, the actual goal is a defragmented, ideal, clear state of beingness of the I am self at 7. Furthermore, at grade 3, and a significant portion of the professional piloting procedures taught at grade 4, we're applying the same shoot for just beyond the goal method to beta defragmentation processing. So what we do to actualize a clearing of energetic channels or personal Zu up to 4 on the standard model, we emphasize a realization toward the self-direction of will at 5. And there you have that. So one of the most important aspects of this systemology that's not always relayed due to the emphasis on the strictly higher levels of understanding and reasoning, because that's the logic and math provide for a greater understanding and reasoning than we're used to, particularly toward the realms of metaphysics and spirituality. So we have the matter to attend to concerning the organic physical body that we use as a genetic vehicle. I mean, we place a lot of emphasis on the self and higher ranges of the spirit because we're moving away from what we've been programmed to in the past concerning this over-identification and entrapment of existing as a physical body. But that's not to say the physical body should be disregarded as unimportant. We spend a considerable amount of personal time and energy getting accustomed to our vehicle in this lifetime and getting used to its foibles and such. So, its capacity during a given point in evolution on the timeline, it's the semantics, the language that you got to learn that's inherent in the communication of the culture you incarnate into. I mean, just about everything and anything that's specific or unique to our awareness as an identity at this point of the timeline of planet Earth. I mean, that's what you're here working with. These are the tools of the game. So it's assumed, and I would say safely assumed by our system, that the alpha spirit carries its own supply of Zu that for it to exist independent of a physical body, and therefore continue on after this lifetime. But it's important because we got that got that in the bag. Transmigration, so that's great. But it's important that we maintain our current existence and its most optimum operating conditions until we can attain and maintain a zoo frequency, the actualized awareness that would enable us to travel above the spheres, moving in and out of bodies at will, which is the exact point at 5.0 that we would find an alpha spirit still very much alive and individuated on the standard model of the zoo line, even if the participation with a specific beta existence, everything 4 and below, or a physical universe is absent. Even apart from the physical universe, we should expect there to be the alpha spirit able to exist for whatever durations or purposes it does, conditions that does that under. So in next-gen systemology, particularly when we're treating the systemology of zoo as a higher unifying applied spiritual technology with its semantic terminology that makes it appear quite superficial to everyday life, it seems really out of place with like the tasks and obligations of maintaining a physical existence in everyday life. But that's really not the case. An acute understanding of zoo is actually very complementary to healthy living and participation in the experiences of the human condition in the physical universe. Unlike many former spiritual philosophies, the methods and principles that support next-gen systemology are not an outright rejection of the material world. To do so, to blatantly rebel, ignore, reject that there's a physical universe taking place around us is to become ignorant to the systems and operation that govern such, which is otherwise known in esoteric circles as cosmic law. Rebel, ignore, or reject cosmic law governing the game in which, the players, are at work, see how that works for you. This is because that's the most counterproductive, non-survival mode of operations you could take. We're able to demonstrate a basic relationship at any point along the standard model between the substances, actions, and awareness that is present at that degree or within a range of a particular level. We have continued to apply some familiar terms to these ranges. A seeker needs to be careful when arbitrarily applying convenient terms. From like your understanding of philosophy in the past to the practice of systemology, such as physical, emotional, psychological. We have very official applications of these terms, and that's described within our texts, such as Tablets of Destiny and Crystal Clear, which are manuals that are self-guiding educational manuals that are entirely based on this standard model and this understanding of zoo that I'm explaining to you in these lectures. For example, we can describe interaction and communication of zoo energy at the emotional and biochemical range, particularly under the control of a reactive response system that's inherent to the body, which we refer to as the Reactive Control Center, or RCC. That's plotted at 2.0 on the standard model. So a communication of zoo is inherently radiated in emotional displays. But we don't want to confuse the emotion itself with zoo, or even the physiological and biochemical descriptions for that same activity. Other more commonly used semantics are accurate within only the limits of the paradigm that's being used to observe these same effects. And the accuracy of the definitions only concerns the observable effects within that paradigm as they apply to other definitions. This is why we've had to develop this wider, more encompassing, holistic systemology in order to make any further progress for the human condition. Because rather than treating Zoo directly as one or another of these systems, it might be better considered that each of these systems, at the levels they represent, are in fact a representation of the total capacity of the flow and circulation of Zoo at any of these given points. So certain ones are true only to the limited extent that they have the ability to be true, only within the limited extent of that degree or that level of systematic operation. So what we look at, we see the health or status of each level determining the nature of Zoo that's radiating from that level, which is a factor of chained interactions that with all related systems along the Zoo line. So this means that while in theory there's nothing that can happen to the physical body or genetic vehicle that could actually affect like the actual quality of the alpha spirit at 7, that's not our only concern. Because while the spirit may be untouched, the experience that the self is processing, that's entirely based on the hardware and programming at the lower levels. So we're using sensory faculties and biochemistry of an organic physical vehicle to experience a physical existence. And we can only expect to excel at this or have any certainty of it to the extent that our tools are properly maintained and utilized. So the greater the defragmentation at physical and emotional levels, the greater the certainty at higher levels of thought activity. It doesn't matter really which direction you work from to resolve this equation, as long as you're left with an empowered, self-honest individual. In most instances, a seeker will work with developing their personal certainty regarding each of these levels simultaneously, although it's been observed that it's easier for many to begin with the physical and emotional levels of defragmentation that incorporate the aspects and facets and elements that are closer in vibration to on the standard model, the Zoo levels that are in closer proximity to physical universe continuity. The ability to work with the physical body and even our chemical emotions is more familiar to the average person in beta awareness than going straight to the control of thought and alpha actualizations and so forth. And to make sure these steps have not been missed, that is one of the key reasons behind this introductory series of lectures, because you can't think your way through this one. This is all about beingness. So we got to make sure nobody's missing this step along the way. It's easy to slide out the significance of maintaining and developing the physical body when it seems we're working to establish levels so far and beyond what is known of the physical universe. That is not the correct approach or way of thinking or philosophy. In the standard issue programming of the human condition, too much emphasis is placed on attaching the I am self identity directly to the physical body. But that does not mean that the solution of this, we don't want to be in the habit of neglecting or mistreating it unnecessarily. This is one of the faults behind some of the spiritual approaches that have come in the past, particularly those that emphasize rejection of the physical world. An intelligent seeker will notice or come to the realization that the neglect and mistreatment of a genetic vehicle out of ignorance or avoidance will actually force more attention and energy toward the physical body in the long run. So essentially, the seeker that operates in rejection of the physical universe and its governing cosmic law will find themselves even more entrapped by its barriers. So in order to be successful in our spiritual work or great work or the pathway to self-honesty that delivers one to these higher states of self-actualization, it's necessary for the seeker to recognize that they're the operator of a vehicle. And it's true that the operator is not the vehicle. Should the need arise, we would simply get out and walk. But we are obviously operators of this vehicle for a reason, and it remains to be the case that we must maintain the physical form as a means of getting us to where we want to be. There is no guarantee that this will be equally attained by all in this lifetime, since we can see many individuals around us who have yet to even begin to chart such a journey for themselves. However, we know that certain vistas are possible for those that seek them, for those that know to seek them. It seems necessary, even momentarily, when we travel along terrain of this portion of the pathway, that the education to get through and out is earned while operating this genetic vehicle today. So long as we seek to conduct the great work from these forms, it's important that we do understand them, their conditions, and their environment, free and clear of program fragmentation. Only then are we going to know exactly what we're dealing with. So in closing tonight, I always tell you to leave them laughing. I composed a verse, a little medley, send you on our way. Maybe encourage you to pick up a book from one of our tables on your way out. So, our books are great, the tree of knowledge grows, their wisdom is real, the truth they carry shows. You can buy them, you can sell them, you can read them, you can tell them. If you promise not to sue us, you can stuff them up your nose. You have a great evening.